The biggest games of the week, including a potential wrong team favored situation, and all of our point spread projections. Week 1 preview on Good Morning College Football. Hello and welcome to episode 87 of Good Morning College Football from campus2canton.com. I'm Nicholas Ian Allen of CFB Winning Edge and Campus to Canton. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you very much for subscribing to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel and giving this video a like. It helps us a bunch. And also, thank you so much to our subscribers at campus2canton.com, where you can join for as little as $2.99 per month. Get access to our Discord, very active, especially this time of year. Get immediate feedback questions with our other subscribers, as well as the founders and other contributors at campus2canton.com on start-sit questions, other college fantasy football questions, C2C, Debbie, what have you, as well as tons of content on the site, whether it's written news reports, other analysis, in-depth, researched pieces there, and other rankings and tools available at campus2canton.com. Again, you can access tons of information on the site for as little as $2.99 per month. But then, of course, we also offer even more at the higher tiers, including the C2C Winning Edge and all 22 tiers, where you get access to a lot of the work that I do, including our CFB Winning Edge team profiles, our returning production database, and our stat projections, which we're going to be discussing our point spread projections and the team profiles on today's show, but those are available 24/7, updated immediately based on news and information in the 2024 team profile. So we do lock in our projections each week. Tuesdays is when that is published to the Discord in the C2C Winning Edge tier channels there. We also publish our stat projections, individual player stat projections, team projections as well for each week. Those this week are going to be published on Wednesday afternoon. As the season goes on, that process gets a little bit quicker, but this week, and perhaps for the first couple of weeks, we'll see, those will be available on Wednesday. Eventually, those will be available on Tuesdays, along with those projected team point spreads and what have you. Our 3 different projection models are CFB Winning Edge team strength ratings, which is sort of our primary model, but also our talent edge projections, which look only at the talent numbers, how well this team will stack up on paper each week, each matchup compared to its opponent. And then sort of the opposite of that, what we call our PRISM model, short for projected scoring margin. It's a stats only model. So only looks at how well has this team performed on the field, statistically speaking, and compare those two for each matchup. Want to give multiple views of each game, want to give as clear a picture as we can, while also removing opinion from the calculation. That's really the way I prefer to use those 3 models. How does it look based only on talent? How does it look based only on stats? Combining those 2 factors, as well as coaching and other numbers that we throw into the mix. And that's our team strength projections. We also do totals for the game projected, based on those PRISM projections, with things like our projected pace and scoring projections there as well. So if you're interested in that sort of stuff, a great place to check it out is, of course, campus2canton.com. Become a C2C Winning Edge or all 22 tier member. So with all that in mind, and giving sort of the outline of our weekly, win each projection system is available and all of that. This is a very busy week, as I'm sure you know. If you're a college fantasy football player, you've probably been glued to all the depth chart releases available on Twitter and in game notes on official team websites and things like that. It's a bit of a long process, and we do take into account those official depth charts released by the teams in our team profiles. Those updates are ongoing. All of our projections for week 1 are set. And so not all depth chart updates have been made or were able to be made before those projections were sort of, set in stone for our record keeping purposes. We do try to keep that very consistent. And throughout the week, throughout the year, each week, Tuesday is a good day because for the most part, with press conferences happening primarily on Monday, occasionally Tuesday, we're going to get most injury updates and things like that that are going to be able to be factored into our team profiles and our projections officially. This week, it's difficult to do that because we see more changes than usual based on those official depth chart projections, and we've had projected depth charts in our team profiles for months. And the vast majority of what we've projected ends up being correct or close to it. But a lot of the changes that we're making, sometimes it's specific positions at wide receiver, sometimes it's the offensive line, starting lineup or what positions. On defense, there are more changes than in other position groups, and so that just takes a little bit of time as well. But the grand, in the grand scheme of things, these depth chart projections don't change our overall projected point spreads very much at all. There will be some small changes in our team strength projections. There will be some small changes in our talent edge projections. It actually doesn't impact the Prism or totals projections at all, because those don't have to do with the individual player changes here or there, or our roster strength ratings or anything like that. So if you're interested in those particular models, those get set in stone immediately as soon as those things are official in our uploaded published team projections. But still, occasionally there will be a game, a matchup in which a projection will flip against the spread. Week 1, that happens a bit more often than it would in the rest of the season. So if there is a change after the projections are official and made public, published in those in the Discord at Campus to Canton, I will try to let you know as quickly as possible. So the Discord is as always the best place for that. Send questions if you've got them. Always happy to answer, make things clear if I can. But that's the best place. The Discord, I'll try to alert you to any changes that may happen there, but also our team profiles, which are continually updated based on any new information, any of these depth chart updates. You can always see the most up-to-date information there. Mention the player stat projections. We're going to talk about those on Friday. Also, following the depth chart updates there as well. If a particular player is listed as the number 1 running back, there were a couple of surprises. I know Eastern Michigan had our projected number 1 ball carrier ended up being second on the depth chart. A little bit of a surprise at the top of the depth chart there for us. So we try to make adjustments like that. No, there are some starting quarterbacks that have been named recently. New Mexico State and UConn both had announced quarterback decisions that differed from our preseason projections. So try to make sure we get, catch all of those in our stat projections as well. There are plenty of other situations where, maybe it's still a little bit unclear or it's unofficial as to, who the starter will be, especially at the quarterback position. So as we find out more information, maybe, Friday leading into a Saturday game, we might get a more clear signal. We'll make that adjustment later in our stat projections as well, even though those are going to be official on Wednesday. So this week more than most, things can change and will change. We'll try to keep them as up to date as possible and let you know in the Discord if we have made a change that's going to impact a particular player as the number one running back, number two running back, number one wide receiver, number two wide receiver, especially the quarterback positions as well. Those are the ones that are going to impact our projected point spreads the most. But anyway, as I said, best place to keep on top of all that is the Discord and the team profiles. So mentioned a couple of quarterback notes there. Also one injury note, maybe a couple of injury notes that caught my eye over the last 24, 48 hours. At Charlotte, Biff Poggi, the head coach there, the 49ers taking on James Madison this week. There were some reports coming out, a press conference with Biff Poggi that he mentioned the injuries during fall camp, and as many as 9 starters may be unavailable for week 1 against James Madison. So keep an eye on that. We don't know exactly which players just yet, but that's worth monitoring. That Charlotte is potentially dealing with quite a few impact players that are going to be unavailable this week. At Jacksonville State, Ron Wiggins expected to be one of the primary running backs in the rotation for the Gamecocks. Underwent surgery this week. Is going to be out for probably the vast majority of the season, 2 to 3 months, it sounds like. So don't expect Ron Wiggins to be a major factor so far this year. Bert Emanuel Jr., who was in the mix to start at quarterback at Central Michigan. He is going to be out, not listed on the week 1 depth chart against Central Connecticut State. Jay Norvell, the head coach at Colorado State, mentioned that Jackson Warren is going to have season-ending surgery. Warren is a 6'8" tight end that was getting quite a bit of buzz in fall camp, expected to emerge as the top tight end for the Rams, and Jay Norvell's offense in recent years has been quite good to the tight end position. So a lot of attention on Warren recently as far as college fantasy football goes. Unfortunately, he is not going to be able to take the field this year. And at Kent State, projected starter at running back, Gavin Garcia is going to miss the season due to a knee injury. That was announced earlier this week as well. So it seems likely that Kai Thomas is going to be the top ball carrier there. Curtis Douglas looks like he is in line to be number 2 on the running back pecking order there. So plenty more injury updates and all of that. Again, the team profiles, we try to make those adjustments as quickly as we can when we hear it, but those depth chart changes are ongoing. I've got 30 tabs open on my screen now that need some attention as soon as we wrap up here. So keep in mind that changes can and will happen. But let's talk about the games. So week 1 is here. It stretches from Thursday to Monday. There are, I think, 96 total games this week, but only 37 of them are FBS versus FBS matchups. So it can be a little bit of a tricky week to determine, if what we see on the field is something that's going to carry over, through the rest of the year. If a team, blows out an FCS opponent in week 1, are they, that much improved, or was it just, something that happens often in week 1? If a team struggles with an FCS opponent, like we saw, a little bit, I guess it was flipped because the FCS opponent, New Mexico State, was heavily favored over New Mexico. But if a team is projected to win by 40, like Hawaii was against Delaware State, and then it only ends up that 35-14 final score, not the most impressive, didn't actually pull away until the fourth quarter. Is that an indicator that Hawaii is, going to really struggle with FBS opponents this season, or was it just hey, we're knocking off the rust of a long off season, still working on some things, putting together a vanilla game plan because UCLA is coming to town next week? It's can be a little bit difficult to figure out which one of those is the truth, or if maybe it's just a small sample. Games sometimes don't go according to plan, sometimes they do. But we do have some premier matchups. The biggest game of the week, arguably, Clemson versus Georgia in Atlanta. Number one, Georgia in the AP poll, the coaches poll, number two in our team strength power ratings. Also, Notre Dame at Texas A&M is a very high-profile matchup. Miami against Florida, a rivalry game that we don't see every year, but those two fan bases certainly interact, much like Clemson and Georgia. These two programs have played each other off and on for a long time. But for Miami and Florida, two coaches that Billy Napier, certainly the hottest seat in college football. Mario Cristobal, maybe the most comfortable based on some of the disappointing aspects of last season. Both of those teams didn't finish particularly strong, and so this game, getting off on the right foot, is very important for both programs. USC and LSU kicking off on Sunday. That's going to be a big one. Two teams that I think, expectations somewhat modest. They're both top 20 teams in our projections. I think both have relatively high ceilings, could make a run at a playoff spot. Both teams should be two of the more exciting offenses in college football, two of the worst defenses in college football last season. Will one or both show a lot of improvement there? Also, the two biggest, the teams that got the biggest amount of attention in week 0, Georgia Tech and Florida State. Will the Yellow Jackets suffer a hangover against Georgia State? They're 21.5-point favorites in that game right now. Will Florida State get back on track against Boston College? That game kicks off on Monday. So we're gonna dig into some of these and look at our CFB Winning Edge projections, how these games shake out in our 3 different projection models. Again, our team strength model, our talent edge model, and our prism model, as well as our projected totals over or under in those matchups. And we'll also discuss some of the ones in which all 3 of those models line up and agree. And those usually, especially if they agree on a favorite, even though it didn't work out for us in week 0 with Florida State, those are usually the ones that I pay attention to the most. We've got a pretty good track record as far as those projections, go historically. If you want official numbers on these, on these projection models, you can find them in our team profiles in the 2024 ATS results database. I'll present here. I'll share my screen briefly to show you what that looks like, show those numbers. History, how these numbers shake out. We do include dating back to 2018. You can see which years were our best, which years we struggled. We've been at 50.6% or better in all but one season. The 2021 season, by far our worst, a bit of an outlier there. Each of the last 2 years, we've been at better than 52% in those model projections. We're off to an 0-2 start, unfortunately, this year in that model, but very, very small sample. We've got quite a few games to go, but 4,300 or more games in our history that we've projected every FBS versus FBS matchup. And more often than not, feel pretty good about how the results have shaken out team strength wise. The talent edge model is the opposite this year, 2-0. But again, very, very small sample. And this model has been less, the number is not quite as good historically. Last season, just barely by one game, it was actually our highest performing model, 52.2% last season, and off to the best start in those two FBS matchups so far this year. The Prism model got off to a great start when we debuted it in 2020. It really struggled in 2021, and then 2022 right about even. But last season, again, all three models were at 52% or better. It was our best season collectively so far. Hopefully that will continue. And then our over-under here, our totals, that's been the best over the course of the all-time history, 52.4% all-time, just shy of 52% last season at 51.8. So overall, the models far from perfect, certainly. And we're not going to shy away if there's a season where it struggles like that 2021 season did. But more often than not, our numbers have given us a pretty good indication of at least what to expect coming into each game, each week. But obviously, as you know, these games aren't played in spreadsheets. They're not played on paper. They are, there are factors that we can't always predict, certainly based on the numbers. So I like to dig in and see where maybe there's some potential issues on those as well. But let's give a rundown. We'll start with Thursday and the FBS matchups there. Minnesota hosting North Carolina. If you tuned in to our team preview for North Carolina, you know that our projections are higher on the Tar Heels than just about anyone. That is definitely the case in this matchup. Our model is a little bit lower on Minnesota because the Gophers team performance wise struggled a bit last season, ranked 105th in overall team performance, 110th on offense, 97th on defense. There are a couple of injuries worth monitoring for Minnesota. All Big Ten wide receiver Daniel Jackson has missed a good chunk of fall camp. There was an injury report a week or more ago that Darius Taylor, the star running back for the Gophers, was dealing with an injury, was unavailable at a public practice. Head coach PJ Fleck, this is a game where there are no official depth charts because Minnesota did not release one. So in response, North Carolina did not release it. So we're doing our best to project here, and also Fleck not necessarily the best as far as offering injury information. So it's a little unclear if those guys are going to be 100%, if they're going to be available or not. They are currently projected as starters, so they're the top two players, arguably, for Minnesota are currently in the projections. But North Carolina, we have projected is closer to a touchdown favorite. 6.83 is our projected point spread in the team strength model. In the Talent Edge model, it's 8.7. But the stats only model likes Minnesota, actually has the Gophers favored by about 3.5 points. So I lean personally North Carolina in this one, but keeping in mind that our projections are a good bit higher on the Tar Heels. They're in the 30s and 40s in a lot of the other projection models. They're number 19 in our team strength power ranking. So it's possible we're too high. We've got Max Johnson is the projected starter at quarterback. There's a pretty big gap in his individual player rating compared to backup Connor Harrell, who it sounds like is going to play as well. If we had Harrell in there as the projected starter, our numbers would be far lower on North Carolina. So keep that in mind. This is one where our three different projection models, at least two of them, the stats only model and the Talent Edge model, see it quite differently on paper. So not a huge projected edge there. On Thursday, we also get, and this is maybe the biggest FCS versus FBS matchup of the week, North Dakota State traveling to Colorado. I've said this before, and we do have FBS versus FCS projections. We do have full FCS rankings, but we rely on others and make approximate roster strength and team strength rankings and ratings for FCS teams based on those other, that other information. We don't have fully built out team profiles for FCS programs, unfortunately. Tried to do it in the past, ran out of time, wasn't quite able to fully get it up and running. But we were able to approximate some of those numbers based on good work that other folks do out there. So with that in mind, any FCS projection, I'm, less, I guess, tied to. But our model, our numbers here, based on incorporating those outside sources for FCS, see this as a pretty even matchup. The Bison, no longer the top team in FCS, South Dakota State, who is going to give Oklahoma State a good game on Saturday, I believe. The Bison, not that king of FCS anymore over the last couple of seasons, but a program that has a rich history and a talented team. We've seen plenty of North Dakota State players drafted in recent years. If you have an opportunity to watch this program, they usually play very well on the line of scrimmage, and that is where Colorado struggled last season in year one under Coach Prime, Deion Sanders. There have been a ton of changes transfer portal wise. The offensive line's completely rebuilt for the Buffs. The defensive line, a lot of incoming transfers expected to play some significant snaps as well. So even though this is a matchup against an FCS program, I think this is going to be a real, we're going to learn whether or not the Buffs truly have improved along the line of scrimmage, both sides of the line of scrimmage, or if they just made a bunch of changes and this is a team that still may struggle up front on both sides of the football. Of course, Colorado has an edge as far as talent goes. The quarterback position, Shedeur Sanders, is one of the best in college football. Wide receiver group, legitimately one of the best in college football. They're number 3 in our position strength ratings at that position. Travis Hunter going both ways, going to be a future high NFL draft pick, All-American candidate, one of the most fun players to watch in the country. But they've added more talent to that room as well to go alongside Travis Hunter and Jimmy Horn Jr., adding LaJohntay Wester from FAU, Will Shepherd, who's gotten a lot of buzz this fall as well. So the Buffs should, you would say, win this game. We do have Colorado favored, but our team strength projection has it at just 1.5 points, which is, a pretty big gap between when we made the projections official on Tuesday. It was 10 Colorado favored against the Bison there. The Talent Edge model has Colorado favored by about 2 touchdowns, but the stats only model, the Prism model, actually has NDSU favored. So not a clear indicator there. As far as the 3 different projection models go. Our third FBS, or our second, I guess, FBS versus FBS matchup on Thursday, Coastal Carolina and Jacksonville State. The Gamecocks favored by 2.5. Now, this is one in which all 3 of our models agree, and they all line up on the favorite Jacksonville State. So historically, our numbers are a little bit better in that situation than just about any other FBS versus FBS matchup across, the 52% we hit last year. These situations, all 3 models agree on the favorite. Give us a few percentage points bump. So not, suggesting this is, I'm not really a best bets guy, but when we are learning about the model and trying to figure out, okay, what are the strengths and what are some areas for improvement, this is a situation where our numbers are even a little bit better than a normal situation. So we have Jacksonville State favored by 6 in the team strength model, just barely favored by more than 2.5 in the Talent Edge model, and then it's about 8.5 points in the Prism model. So Jacksonville State looks like a pretty good spot for our projections there. On Friday, Oklahoma host Temple. They're 42.5-point favorites. Our team strength model couldn't quite get there. We've got the Sooners favored by 40.1. The Prism model actually has Oklahoma favored by 47.4. So not all three agree in that one. But Oklahoma is dealing with some injuries. We mentioned that before. It sounds like Nick Anderson may not be available, wasn't listed as a starter at wide receiver. Brennan Thompson was. Those two, we didn't make the change in our team profiles, but just make a mental note that Anderson sounds like he's probably not going to play this week. Andrew Anthony still working his way back as well. So the Sooners a little bit depth, not in the ideal spot at the wide receiver position. Of course, they have Jaden Gibson down for a while. Does sound like Jaleel Farouk is going to be back. Also, Deion Burks had a little bit of a legal situation. It was unclear most of the offseason as to whether or not he would be fully available this game or have to deal with some sort of suspension. I don't think there's been any official word, but Burks was listed as a starter in the slot for Oklahoma. So I think he's going to be available to play this entire game, but still something perhaps to keep in mind there. But the Sooners big favorites, even if in our team strength model we have Temple keeping it within the 42.5. FAU and Michigan State on Friday. We have not much of a projected edge in either way. We do have FAU expected to cover, but by a very slim margin. Team strength model has it at 13.2. The Talent Edge model 13.3. The Prism model does have Michigan State expected to cover. Our projected score there, or our projected margin there, is 18. Western Michigan against Wisconsin also on Friday. The Badgers, we do have in the team strength model expected to cover the 23.5. We've got Wisconsin at 24.6. The Talent Edge model sees these two a lot closer, a little under 2 touchdowns there. So quite a difference there in the Talent Edge model. Western Michigan, especially for a MAC team, does look pretty good on paper. The projected scoring margin, very close to the odds makers. 24.2 is our projection there. Final score, we actually have this one going a good bit under. We've got the final score projected at 37-12, so 49.2 total points there. And according to DraftKings, the projected total is 57. So that's a bit of a rare spot for us this week. We are on a lot of overs, and that does make me a bit nervous. I don't like to be as lopsided as we are in any direction, whether it's a bunch of underdogs, a bunch of favorites, a bunch of overs, a bunch of unders. I'd rather be a little bit closer to 50-50 than we are on the over-unders. But this one we do see significantly lower, which may be a little bit of an indicator there. So a bit unclear, but we're about 7 and 7.8 points under the projected official total in that one. So we'll see. TCU and Stanford is the last FBS versus FBS game on Friday. We've got in the team strength model very close to the odds makers. TCU a 9-point favorite. We've got the Horned Frogs favored by about 7.8. The Talent Edge model sees it a little bit closer, under 5 points there, but the Prism model is a bigger believer in TCU. That projected score there closer to 2 touchdowns. Moving to Saturday, there are a couple of big kickoffs at noon. Clemson and Georgia is maybe the game of the week. Number 1 team in the country, the Georgia Bulldogs, according to the pollsters. Number 2 in our team strength power ratings. We have Georgia favored and expected to win this game. It is a neutral site in Atlanta, and you may think that's a much bigger edge geographically for Georgia. It's right down the road, less than an hour from Athens, or about an hour depending. But Clemson is not that far away either, and there are a lot of Clemson fans in the Atlanta area. So I'm expecting fairly close to 50-50 representation in the stands there at Mercedes-Benz. Yeah, we'll see. Georgia, I'm sure, much more familiar with that stadium, the SEC championship game being held there, of course. But Clemson is, not going to be fully out of place, I wouldn't expect. So if you're trying to, determine if one team has a bit of an edge geographically in that neutral site matchup, I think it's fairly even there. But Georgia is the better team on paper. Number 3 in roster strength, number 5 in team performance last season in our numbers. One of the top quarterback prospects in the country in Carson Beck. There are a few potential injuries to keep in mind. There is a possible suspension with Trevor Etienne, maybe due to a legal situation that he had back in the spring. So that's a little unclear on both the offensive and defensive line. Georgia's had some players miss some time this fall, including projected center Jared Wilson, projected defensive lineman Jordan Hall in the 2 deep has missed some time as well. This game is also one where the depth charts have not been officially released. So, we've got our projections. Think they're probably, for the most part, fairly accurate. We do the best we can there based on reports coming out of fall camp and whatnot. But we've got Georgia favored by just single digits, 9 points there in this one. In the team strength model, talent edge model, even a little bit closer, under a touchdown. But in the projected scoring margin, the Prism model, the stats only model, Georgia is about a 3 touchdown favorite. So again, all 3 models don't quite line up on this one, but should be one of the best games of the week. Clemson, especially with Florida State going down in week 0, looks like an ACC title contender. The Miami Hurricanes maybe kind of a popular pick there, but Clemson, I think, absolutely going to be in the mix for that ACC title, and if so, certainly playoff spot on the line. So maybe this is an opportunity to maybe the first of 2. Maybe we'll get a rematch in the playoff if all goes according to plan for Georgia, and if Clemson can make a run and get back into playoff form. Penn State and West Virginia, this is one that our model doesn't see a lot of room, but Penn State expected to win, 7.5 point favorites. Our model, both the team strength and talent edge, have the Nittany Lions favored by 7. The Prism model likes Penn State a bit more, has the Nittany Lions favored by 12 in this matchup. But this is one, and I mentioned it on the CFB Winning Edge podcast. Scott Bogman, our host, he didn't agree with me. He thinks that Penn State's going to go in and maybe make a statement in this game, win by double digits or so. The Mountaineers, I don't know. They're I think going to give Penn State some trouble. Garrett Green, really solid quarterback, can beat you on the ground, also through the air. The 2-headed running back duo of Jaheim White and CJ Donaldson. It's not quite Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen that Penn State have, and certainly curious to see how new offensive coordinator Andy Kotelnicki works with that really talented duo. But I think Penn State can make this game interesting. It is in Morgantown. Even though the final score ended up getting a little bit out of hand last season, and Penn State did have a 94% post-game win expectancy number in this matchup in Beaver Stadium. This was closer than that final score would indicate, especially early on. And West Virginia, put together a really unexpectedly solid season, going 9-4 last year. Curious. This one is definitely one that I'm excited to watch. And even though our projections don't see a big edge in it. I think West Virginia can keep this game very close going into the fourth quarter. All right, let's move a little quicker through the rest of Saturday's slate. Virginia Tech and Vanderbilt, kind of similar to some others that we discussed. Both the team strength model and the talent edge model see the underdog keeping this game a little bit closer. Virginia Tech is favored by 13.5. We've got it at 9 and 6.5 respectively. But once again, the Prism model on the favorite, Virginia Tech expected to cover. We've got it at 15.4 there. Maryland at UConn. We mentioned that UConn made a little bit of a surprising quarterback pick, at least compared to how we had it projected early on. Nick Evers, the former Oklahoma and Wisconsin quarterback. My expectations weren't very high, even though he was a 4-star rated player coming out of high school. He was fourth or so on the Wisconsin QB depth chart last season. Looked like maybe, hate to use the word bust, but somebody that just had not come close to matching that level of recruiting interest at the collegiate level, but maybe an opportunity for him to resurrect his career, be the starter at UConn, where we have the Huskies expected to cover, but Maryland a 20-point favorite. We've got it projected in the team strength model at 18. The talent edge model, much closer, less than a touchdown there. But once again, Prism model on the favorite at 23.3. Kent State at Pitt. This is one where all three models do agree. We do have the Golden Flashes expected to cover in this one, but it's very, very close. Our team strength projections at 23. The line officially was 24. And Prism, the projected scoring margin, has it around 3 touchdowns as well. But we have Kent State keeping it close enough that all three models are expecting the Flashes to cover. Ohio State is a 50-point favorite against Akron. Our team strength model couldn't quite get there. 49.4 is our projection. The stats only model at 50.5 did actually just cover there for the Buckeyes, the number one team in our team strength power rankings. The talent edge model on both of those last two, good bit closer. Texas is a 32.5-point favorite over a Colorado State team that I think is, got the potential to get to a bowl game this season. So I was a little bit surprised that we actually had the Longhorns expected to cover that big of a number. We have Texas at 35.1 in the team strength model. The Prism model also has Texas covering. The team strength model does not, closer to 3 touchdowns in that one. Miami and Florida, one of the premier matchups of the week. This is one where we do have the favorite projected to cover in both the team strength model and the talent edge model. We've got Miami favored by 5.3 and 7.8 respectively in that one, but the stats only model likes the Gators, actually has Florida expected to win outright at home. So a little bit of a different indicator there based on the stats only. Indiana, going to be a much different Indiana team under Kirk Cignetti this season, hosting FIU. We do have the Hoosiers expected to cover the 21.5 in our team strength ratings. The Prism rating, much better because it does take into account Cignetti's history at James Madison. So a bit of a boost there. The talent edge model has it a bit closer, but still Indiana, a clear favorite, expected to get a fairly easy win there. Talent Edge has the Hoosiers at 16.3, but 2 out of 3 expect IU to cover. UTEP is traveling to Nebraska, and the line is 27.5 officially. All 3 of our models actually agree on UTEP to cover. Dylan Raiola, true freshman, taking the field for the first time. I guess our numbers just say a little bit too big of a potential, that point spread there, 27.5. We've got it at 23.5, 13.5, and 23.4 respectively. I'm curious to see how Scotty Walden's team performs in game 1 for the Miners. Expectations, once again, modest for the season, but think that maybe this is one a little bit closer than the experts, the odds makers, would indicate. We'll see. Eastern Michigan and UMass, future MAC rivals. This one, I was curious as to whether or not our projection would flip based on the official depth charts, but we do have Eastern Michigan expected to cover in the team strength model by a very thin margin. The other two models are very different. UMass with nearly a 5-point, favored by 4 points, in the Talent Edge model, but Eastern Michigan favored by more than 2 touchdowns in the stats only model. So no clear indication one way or the other there. Ohio takes on Syracuse, a new look Syracuse team that we do have expected to cover the 17.5 in our team strength model. Talent Edge model has it even higher at over 20 points, but the stats only model, and based on the success that Ohio has had, double-digit wins last season being part of that, a good bit closer. We've got Syracuse favored by 12.7 in that one. Kennesaw State's first game as an FBS program, they take on UTSA. We've got the Owls expected to cover in both the team strength model and the Talent Edge model. 25 is the line. We've got it at 21.8 and 17.5, but the stats only model way on the UTSA side. We've got the Roadrunners favored by 37.5 in that model. Northwestern hosting defending MAC champion Miami of Ohio. This is our closest projected point spread to the official line of the week. So it's going to be lucky or unlucky one way or the other, whether this is a win or a loss for us, but we've got it right at the 3 as the odds makers have it. 2.98 is Northwestern's projection there. So we're on Miami of Ohio, but by the slimmest of margins in that model. The Talent Edge model, of course, sees Northwestern being the more talented team. 6.5 is our projection there, but the stats only model, very much on the Miami of Ohio side of things, have the Red Hawks expected to win outright by more than a touchdown. So differing opinions there. Pretty interesting G5 matchup, Boise State at Georgia Southern. This one would have been a lot different if Malachi Nelson had been named the starting quarterback compared to Maddox Madsen for the Broncos. We talked about it when the news came out. Of course, Nelson, the former 5-star, one of the top quarterback recruits in the country a couple of years ago. His individual player rating is quite a bit higher than Madsen, even though, named as the starter. It's understandable to say that Madsen at this point better, at least in the eyes of the coaching staff, than Nelson. Nevertheless, making that quarterback change hurt our Boise State ranking and projection by a significant amount. As a result, all 3 of our models are on Georgia Southern to cover this game pretty clearly by more than 8 points in the team strength model, by 7 points in the Talent Edge model, by 2.5 in the stats only model, which doesn't factor in that Madsen versus Nelson matchup or competition. But nevertheless, Boise State, 13-point favorites, expected by many to be among the top challengers for that group of five spot in the playoff. We'll see. Our numbers differ now a little bit than a lot of the other opinions out there due to that quarterback decision. But if Madsen plays well, his rating will rise, and Boise State's rating will rise with it. But as of right now, we expect Georgia Southern in Statesboro, where there's going to be, I'm sure, a great crowd on hand. Probably going to be a little bit different weather situation maybe than Boise State might be used to. So maybe maybe the Eagles are going to be able to keep this one closer than the odds makers would expect. At Old Dominion, at South Carolina, ODU is traveling to Columbia. We've got the Monarchs expected to cover in all 3 models. 21 is the official number according to the odds makers. We've got it at 18.3, 16.2, and 12.6 respectively. South Alabama taking on North Texas. This one very, very close in the team strength model. The number is 5, according to the odds makers. We've got it at 4.9. So North Texas officially expected to cover there. We do give the talent edge outright to the Mean Green, have North Texas favored by 3.6 in that model, but the Prism model, completely different, has the Jags expected to win and cover. 11.5 is the projection there. Western Kentucky is taking on Alabama. 31.5-point favorites are the Crimson Tide. TJ Finley officially named the starting quarterback for the Hilltoppers, but potentially multiple QBs expected to take the field this week. We've got the Hilltoppers keeping it closer. Our projection is 24.4 in the team strength power rating model. The Talent Edge model, a good bit closer than that. Even in the Prism model, only has Alabama favored by 20.5. So all three agree on Western Kentucky covering the 31.5 in Kalen DeBoer's debut in Tuscaloosa. Houston against UNLV. This one surprised me just a little bit. I, quite frankly, was a little bit surprised that Houston, even as a Power 4 program now, is favored, although at home, against UNLV. We've got this a little bit closer. We do have the Cougs favored, but by only 0.5 point. In the team strength model, the Talent Edge model is 2.2. The stats only model likes the Rebels, who have not made an official QB designation just yet. Matthew Sluka competing with Malik Willis Williams, excuse me. Regardless, I think that this UNLV team is going to be a lot of fun to watch, and think there's a good chance that they're going to be able to knock off Houston on the road. But we'll see. Perhaps Houston, Willie Fritz, new head coach, has a lot of history of success. This game could certainly be an indication that Houston's a much improved team. So I think this is going to be a fun matchup. Sam Houston traveling to Rice, a tragic situation on the Rice campus this week. So definitely thinking about the Rice University community there. As far as projections go, we do have Sam Houston covering, Rice favored by 10 in this one, but our numbers are at 7.4, 3, and 5 in our three models there. Troy, a much different Troy team, defending Sun Belt champs, taking on Nevada, who impressed, at least exceeded expectations in week 0. History indicates that week 0, teams that play in week 0 struggle a little bit in week 1. So Troy has been focusing on Nevada all off season. Nevada was focusing on SMU all off season. Also, Nevada first-year head coach Jeff Choate. SMU didn't know what to expect specifically. Troy has now seen Nevada on film. Nevada doesn't necessarily know what to expect with a new head coach, Jared Parker, there for the Trojans. So keep all of that in mind. We do have Troy expected to cover 8.5. We've got our projection at 10.3 in the team strength model. The Talent Edge model actually gives Nevada the edge. The Wolfpack favored by 2 in that one. The Prism model, stats only model, has it pretty close to the odds makers, but we've got Troy favored by 9 in that one. Big game of the week, Notre Dame at Texas A&M. This is the game in which our team strength projections think the wrong team is favored. We went into a lot more detail on this matchup in our CFB Winning Edge preview, week 1 preview. So check that out in the Campus to Canton podcast feed, as well as the CFB Winning Edge podcast feed. But our models are on Notre Dame. All three have the Fighting Irish as the outright favorite, and it's all by at least 3.5 points. So most of the time, that's a pretty good indicator in our model. We do pretty well on wrong team favored. We do now keep track as far as if money line, we put in the sort of a hypothetical $100 bet, and we're going to keep track as to whether or not we end up in the positive or negative on these situations. But as we discussed in the podcast, there are certainly plenty of reasons. There's plenty of evidence that maybe our model's a little bit too high on Notre Dame in this particular matchup. A big part of that is the offensive line. Notre Dame announced in its official depth chart that they are starting a true freshman at left tackle, Anthony Knapp. Also, all 5 offensive line starters in that depth chart were not full-time starters for the Fighting Irish last season. Ashton Craig at center, Billy Charoux at right guard. Each have 3 career starts under their belt, but those 2 beat out Rocco Spindler and Pat Coogan, who were starters last season, double-digit starters in their career for Notre Dame. Tosh Baker, 4-game starter, also lost out on the tackle competition there. He's listed at number 2 at left tackle. So that could be a great situation for the Texas A&M pass rush. Shamar Turner, all SEC performer, interior defensive lineman there. Nick Scordon, the transfer from Purdue, projected in a ton of those way too early NFL draft mocks as a top 10 pick, maybe top 5 in some. If he's lined up against the true freshman, could be a long day for Notre Dame. Also, Riley Leonard, the transfer starting quarterback for the Fighting Irish. We haven't really seen him as fully healthy in a while. Mike Elko, the Texas A&M head coach, of course, knows Leonard well, knows his strengths, knows his weaknesses when those 2 are together at Duke. So this is a really, really intriguing matchup. Of course, it's in College Station as well, but we've got Notre Dame as a top 2 defense in our roster strength rankings. They were a top 7 defense last season. Texas A&M, very talented, top 20 in overall roster strength. Excited to see what Connor Weigman can do, fully healthy at quarterback as well. Curious to see how all the transfers shake out, especially on the defense for the Aggies. But pretty clear indicator here that we've got Notre Dame as the team to beat. It's our only wrong team favored projection of the week. So we'll find out on Saturday, but that certainly one of the best games of the week, I expect. Fresno State traveling to the defending champion Michigan Wolverines. We've got Michigan expected to cover by a decent edge there. The number's 21. According to the odds makers, we've got it at 27 in our team strength projections. The stat projections have Michigan at 25. So 2 out of the 3 have the Wolverines covering, but the talent edge model a little bit closer, 15.3 there. A lot of change at Michigan, obviously. And Fresno State has been a little bit banged up in fall camp. So that'll be a fun matchup for those 2. UCLA traveling to Hawaii. This is one where our models all 3 agree, and all 3 agree on the favorite, on the Bruins to cover on the road. That's usually a pretty good indicator. I mentioned, the week 0 to week 1 situation. Hawaii was in a similar spot last season where, looked okay in week 0, but then Stanford comes in and able to it was maybe their best performance of the year. In that one, UCLA dealing with a new head coach as well, Deshaun Foster. That there can be some growing pains, learning on the job, especially as a first-time head coach. Travel situation, it's a long trip even for UCLA. But we've got the Bruins here, and as we've discussed in our team previews, our numbers probably a little bit higher on UCLA than most, and maybe more than they should. But we've got the Bruins as a 21-point favorite in the team strength model, 14.8 in the talent edge, and a 20-point favorite in the stats only model. All 3 of those agree that the Bruins can cover the 14. So usually that's a decent indicator for us. Southern Miss at Kentucky. We've got the Wildcats as a very, very, slightly projected to cover the 28 in both our team strength model and our and our Prism models. 28.3 and 28.6 in those. The talent edge model much closer. We've got Kentucky favored by 15 there. We've got Georgia State covering against the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets in all 3 models by a pretty significant margin. The Jackets, of course, one of the big winners in week 0, the big winner in week 0, knocking off top 10 Florida State. But will there be a little bit of a hangover effect? Will that week 0 carry over? Also, Tech in years past has struggled a little bit against Group of 5 opponents. Georgia State's been preparing for this game all off season, though there is, of course, new head coach Dale McGee taking over for the Panthers. But we've got all of our projections well under or much closer than the 21.5. James Madison and Charlotte, we've got the Dukes expected to cover the 8 against the shorthanded 49ers in the team strength model. The stats only model is all over James Madison at 18.1, but the team strength model sees it a lot closer. JMU favored by 6 in that one. New Mexico at Arizona, we couldn't come close to the 31.5, even though feel pretty good about the Wildcats. Sounds like Tet McMillan is going to play. Noah Fafita at quarterback. New head coach Brett Brennan. New Mexico looked much improved in a lot of ways, but still heartbreaker losing to Montana State in week 1. Nevertheless, we've got Arizona favored by 28.7 in the team strength model, 16.7 in the Talent Edge, 24.2 in the Prism model. Rival Arizona State taking on Wyoming. This one, the Talent Edge and the team strength model has the Sun Devils expected to cover. 6.5 is the number. We've got it at 8 in the team strength model, 11 in the Talent Edge model. But this is another one with the stats only model. I think, as expected, sees Wyoming as the much more consistent team, actually has the Cowboys winning outright. USC and LSU, we touched on it briefly early on. Expect the offenses to be very good, even with new starters at quarterback, even having to replace multiple top receivers top wide receivers from last season, different starters at running back as well on both sides. Nevertheless, Lincoln Riley's USC offense consistently one of the best in the country, and LSU, if there's any carryover from last season's Heisman Trophy winning campaign with Jaden Daniels, 2 first-round wide receivers. That's going to be an explosive LSU offense again as well. But the 2 defenses were among the worst in the country. Both have new coordinators, both very talented units. These teams really look like mirror images of one another. They're meeting in Las Vegas, so location-wise, geographically, USC maybe a little bit easier travel situation, but LSU, of course, LSU fans travel very well and probably going to outnumber USC in the stands. But this one, on a stage all its own on Sunday night, should be, again, one of the best matchups of week 1. We do have LSU favored, but by a little bit less than the odds makers in our team strength model. We've got the Tigers as about a 3-point favorite. 4 was the official line that we compared it against. The Talent Edge model sees this as almost dead even. LSU with a little more than half a point of a edge there. And then in the stats only model, LSU does cover, but by a very slim margin, 4.2 in that one. So this game, on paper, looks like one of the best, one of the most even matchups of week. Last game for us, Boston College at Florida State on Monday night. This is something that in our projections, and most watched week 0, the big takeaway was, Georgia Tech beat Florida State. Florida State really struggled. DJU, overrated. Florida State defensive line, overrated. This FSU team, not as good as we expected. They're number 7 in our team strength power rankings. They're our highest rated ACC team. And we don't make adjustments to our team performance ratings until after week 2, because, there are only a few games in week 0, because there are 50 plus teams that are playing FCS opponents in week 1. There's going to be almost as many in week 2. We wait a little bit. And so maybe we're still too high on Florida State. That absolutely could be possible. But also maybe, week 0 is just a little bit of a hiccup. It was a difficult situation traveling across the Atlantic Ocean to Ireland. There's a rust from the offseason, a lot of new faces in that Florida State roster, and Georgia Tech had a great game plan that it executed very well limited possessions for that FSU offense, ran the football really well. Florida State, maybe they bounce back. At least that's what our numbers indicate. 15.5-point favorites are the Seminoles against Bill O'Brien's BC squad. Very curious to see Thomas Castellanos, the quarterback, see how he fits into that O'Brien more pro-style system. But as far as our numbers go, 2 of our 3 expect FSU to cover. The team strength model has the Seminoles favored by 18.6. The stats only model has FSU favored by 18. As has been the case in a lot of these, Florida State a little bit less of a favorite in the Talent Edge model, 10.7 there. But recapping very quickly, Notre Dame is our only wrong team favorite in our projections this week. All 3 agree that Jacksonville State will cover the 2.5 against Coastal Carolina on Thursday. Kent State will cover the 24 at Pitt, but by very close margins in all 3 models on Saturday. We've got UTEP covering 27.5 at Nebraska. Georgia Southern covering 13 against Boise State. Old Dominion covering the 21 against South Carolina. Western Kentucky covering 31.5 at Alabama. UNLV covering 2.5 at Houston. Sam Houston covering 10 at Rice. Notre Dame, again, all 3 models have the Fighting Irish covering the 3 and winning outright against Texas A&M. UCLA covering 2 touchdowns at Hawaii. Georgia State covering 21.5 against Georgia Tech. And then the New Mexico Lobos covering big number, 31.5 at Arizona. So we'll see how the numbers do. We'll recap it on Monday of next week. On Friday, we will dig into some of our stat projections, compare them to the underdog, higher or lower numbers, and maybe take some questions. We'll see. We'll figure out our weekly process as we move forward. But that is going to wrap it up for us, our full week 1 preview. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for subscribing to the Campus Canton YouTube channel, giving this video a like, and then, of course, if you are a member at CampusToCanton.com, you're our very favorites. And if you want access to all of these projections 24/7, updated based on those depth charts, injury news, all that good stuff, those are available to our C2C Winning Edge and all 22 tier members at Campus to Canton. So that's going to wrap it up for us today. We will be back on Friday for Good Morning College Football. Until then,